The child didn't blink for 6 minutes. Dr. Wilson counted each excruciating second as the small boy stared at him with eyes like polished marble, pure white, without iris or pupil. Not blind, no. The boy could see perfectly well. Something else entirely was wrong. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end. New Orleans, 1952. The air hung heavy with humidity as Dr. Thomas Wilson made his way down Burgundy Street, medical bag in hand. 5 years of practicing medicine in Louisiana's most superstitious city had taught him to separate fact from folklore, science from speculation, but the Montoya case was testing those boundaries. It had begun 3 weeks earlier with a house call to the old Montoya residence in the French Quarter, a crumbling Spanish colonial mansion that seemed to lean away from its neighbors as if ashamed of some secret. Elena Montoya, a widow of 32, had summoned him to examine her son, Nicholas. "When he doesn't sleep anymore, doctor," she had whispered, dark circles beneath her eyes matching the faded wallpaper behind her. And his eyes. Something is happening to his eyes. Thomas had expected pink eye, perhaps an infection. What he found instead was a 5-year-old boy sitting perfectly still on his bed, staring unblinkingly at the wall. When the child turned to look at him, Thomas nearly dropped his stethoscope. The boy's eyes were completely white, as if someone had poured milk into them, drowning the rich brown irises Thomas had seen in a family photograph on the mantelpiece. Medical literature offered no explanation. Cataracts didn't present this way. No disease Thomas knew of could bleach the iris and pupil while leaving vision intact. Because Nicholas could see, that much was evident from the way the boy's gaze followed his every movement with unnerving precision. Now, as Thomas approached the Montoya house for his 4th visit, a sense of dread settled over him. Last time, he had drawn blood for testing. The results had come back normal, baffling him further. Mrs. Gesson, his nurse who had lived in New Orleans her entire life, refused to accompany him. "That family is cursed, doctor," she had said, making the sign of the cross. "Everyone knows about the Montoyas, children born without souls." Thomas had dismissed her concerns as local superstition, but her words echoed in his mind as he climbed the worn steps to the front door. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Elena Montoya stood there, thinner than before, her once beautiful face haggard with exhaustion. "He's not alone anymore," she said without greeting. "My niece's children. It's happening to them too." Thomas followed her through the dimly lit parlor, where heavy curtains blocked the afternoon sun. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of Montoyas with proud Spanish features and dark, lively eyes. None with the milk-white gaze that now afflicted Nicholas. In the back sitting room, 3 children sat in perfect stillness. Nicholas, whom he recognized, and 2 others, a girl of perhaps 7 and a boy of 4. All 3 turned to look at him in unsettling synchronization, 6 white eyes, devoid of expression. "But when did this start with the others?" Thomas asked, keeping his voice steady despite the chill crawling up his spine. "Maria started 3 days ago," Elena said, nodding to the girl. "Little Antonio yesterday morning. Their mother is my husband's sister. She's in the kitchen, inconsolable." Thomas approached the children cautiously. "Hello, Nicholas. Do you remember me?" The boy nodded once, a mechanical gesture. "Dr. Wilson, you took my blood." His voice was different from their previous visits, flatter, without the natural cadence of a child. "Does anything hurt? Your eyes, do they bother you?" All 3 children answered in unison, "Nothing hurts anymore." Elena stifled a sob behind him. Thomas opened his bag and removed his ophthalmoscope, though previous examinations had revealed nothing useful. As he leaned in to examine Nicholas's eyes, the boy spoke again. "We are the payment." Thomas paused. "Payment? For what, Nicholas? The three children turned their heads, looking at each other as if conferring silently. Then, as one, they faced Thomas again. "For what grandfather took," Maria said. "And for what wasn't his to claim," added Antonio, his childish voice incongruous with the formal phrasing. "Every generation must pay," Nicholas finished, "until the debt is settled." A door slammed somewhere in the house, making Thomas jump. Elena crossed herself. "Doctor," she whispered, "there's something I haven't told you. Something about my husband's grandfather, Sebastian Montoya." Thomas felt a heaviness in the air, as if the house itself were holding its breath. "What about him?" he asked, though something told him he might not want to know the answer. Elena glanced nervously at the children, who sat unnaturally still, watching. He was a collector of rare objects, items with history, power. Some say he took something that didn't belong to him, something sacred. Have you ever felt like someone was looking right through you, seeing something else entirely? Tell us in the comments. Thomas followed Elena into her late husband's study, a room heavy with the scent of old books and tobacco. The children remained in the sitting room, unnervingly still, their white eyes fixed on the space where the adults had been. "Sebastian Montoya came to New Orleans in 1867, Elena said, unlocking a roll-top desk with a small brass key she wore around her neck. He was fleeing something in Spain, some scandal or debt. The family never spoke of it directly." She withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. He became obsessed with the local traditions, voodoo, hoodoo, all the practices the church condemned. Thomas took the journal when she offered it, careful with the fragile binding. Inside, Sebastian's handwriting filled the pages, elegant script interspersed with strange symbols and sketches of artifacts. "He collected objects said to have power," Elena continued. "Items from rituals, ceremonies, things that should have been left alone." Thomas paused on a page containing a detailed drawing of what appeared to be a small carved figure, humanoid, but with distorted proportions. Beneath it, Sebastian had written, "The vessel holds what cannot be seen. Guard it well, for it guards what we cannot lose." "What is this?" Thomas asked, pointing to the drawing. Elena's face paled. "They call it the âme voleur, the soul thief. Sebastian took it from a voodoo priestess. They say he tricked her." A floorboard creaked outside the study door. Thomas looked up to see Nicholas standing there, perfectly still, white eyes unblinking. "He didn't trick her," the boy said in that unnaturally flat voice. "He betrayed her." Elena made the sign of the cross. "Go back to the others, Nicola." The boy didn't move. The queen trusted him. She showed him her treasures. He stole what was most precious. "The queen?" Thomas asked, addressing Nicola directly. "You mean the voodoo priestess?" Nicola nodded once, the movement mechanical. Marie Laveau trusted him. She taught him her secrets, and he took what wasn't his. Thomas felt a chill. Even he knew that name. Marie Laveau, the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans, whose powers were legendary throughout Louisiana. She had died in 1881, but her influence remained potent in the city's collective memory. "That's just a story," Elena said, though her trembling voice betrayed her doubt. "Sebastian was a collector, nothing more." "Where is this object now?" Thomas asked. "This soul thief." "We don't have it," Elena insisted. "It disappeared after Sebastian died. My husband searched for years, believing it might be the cause of what's happening to the children, the curse." "It's not lost," Nicholas said. "It's hiding. It's hungry." With that cryptic statement, the boy turned and walked back toward the sitting room, his footsteps unnaturally precise. Thomas stared after him, then turned back to the journal. He flipped through more pages, finding entries that grew increasingly erratic over time. October 3rd, 1870, he read aloud. The figure grows warm when held. I hear whispers at night, though I cannot make out the words. He turned another page. December 18th, 1870. My son will not look at me. His eyes have begun to change. God help me. What have I done? Elena's hands trembled as she took the journal back. Sebastian's son, my husband's father, was the first. They say his eyes turned white for 3 weeks, then returned to normal, but he was different afterward, cold, as if something essential had been taken from him. And then it passed to the next generation. My husband's eyes changed when he was 12, then they returned to normal, but he was never the same. Now it's happening to Nicholas and his cousins. Thomas tried to process this information through his medical training, searching for rational explanations: genetic disorder, environmental toxin, mass hysteria. None seemed to fit the symptoms he'd observed. Has anyone outside the family been affected? He asked. Eleanor hesitated. And Dee, the Thibodeau girl next door. She plays with Nicholas sometimes. Her mother called yesterday, hysterical, said Emmeline's eyes were changing. Thomas's stomach dropped. If this was spreading beyond the Montoya bloodline. I need to see her, he said, gathering his medical bag. Elena grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. Be careful, doctor. Those who look too deeply into our family's affairs often find themselves affected. Affected how? Dreams at first, voices, then... She glanced toward the sitting room. Indeed, then they start to see what the children see. As if on cue, a soft, synchronous humming began from the sitting room. 3 childish voices, but the melody was no lullaby or nursery rhyme. It was older, with quarter tones that didn't belong in Western music, creating dissonance that made Thomas's skin crawl. He followed the sound back to the sitting room. The 3 children sat in a triangle on the floor now, heads bowed, humming that strange melody. As Thomas watched, they raised their heads in unison, white eyes fixed on him. Do you want to see? They asked in perfect synchronization. Do you want to know what was stolen? Before Thomas could answer, a knock came at the front door. Elena hurried to answer it, returning moments later with a frantic woman clutching a little girl's hand. The child, no more than 6, stared up at Thomas with eyes that were no longer brown, but clouding over with white, like cream poured into coffee. Please help her, the woman begged. Please make it stop. Thomas knelt before the girl. Emmeline, he presumed. Hello there, I'm Dr. Wilson. Can you tell me how you're feeling? The girl tilted her head, studying him with eyes half transformed. When she spoke, her voice held the same flat quality as the Montoya children. They're coming back, she said. All of them, through us. Who's coming back? Thomas asked gently. Emmeline smiled, an expression devoid of childish warmth. The ones who were taken, the stolen souls. The Montoya children had stopped humming. In the sudden silence, Thomas could hear something else, a faint whispering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And what do they want? He asked, though he wasn't sure if he was addressing the children or whatever presence seemed to fill the room. To come home, all 4 children answered together. To reclaim what's theirs. And you? Have you ever felt like something essential was missing inside you? Share in the comments. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He tossed in his bed as fragments of Sebastian Montoya's journal replayed in his mind. Around 3 in the morning, he gave up, lit a lamp, and began writing his own notes on the case. Medical explanations felt increasingly inadequate. The spread of the condition to Emmeline Thibodeau suggested contagion, yet there were no other symptoms, no fever, no inflammation, nothing but those white eyes and the changed behavior. When he finally dozed off at his desk, his dreams were invaded by whispers, in a language he didn't understand, but somehow comprehended. They spoke of darkness, confinement, and an insatiable hunger to return. He awoke with a start at dawn, his notepad filled with writing he didn't remember, strange symbols interspersed with English words. Vessel, threshold, return, payment. Shaken, Thomas washed his face with cold water. In the mirror, he noticed with alarm that the whites of his eyes seemed whiter somehow. More pronounced, just a trick of the light, he told himself. Just exhaustion. By noon, 2 more cases had been reported. Thomas visited both, children who had played with either the Montoya children or Emmeline. Each showed the same symptoms. Eyes gradually whitening, speech patterns changing, personalities flattening. They spoke of coming back and reclaiming, using vocabulary far beyond their years. Desperate for answers, Thomas decided to consult someone who might understand what he was facing. Mrs. Chasson, his nurse, had reluctantly provided a name, Mama Cecile, an aging voodoo practitioner who lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. The cottage stood apart from its neighbors, surrounded by cypress trees draped with Spanish moss. Wind chimes made of bones and shells created eerie music in the gentle breeze. Thomas hesitated at the gate, medical rationality warring with his growing certainty that this was beyond science. The door opened before he could knock. Mama Cecile was smaller than he expected, her dark skin deeply lined with age, her white hair wrapped in a faded purple scarf. But her eyes were sharp and clear as she appraised him. "Will the doctor who's treating the Montoya children?" she said. Not a question. "How did you—" "Word travels," she interrupted, stepping aside to let him in. "Especially when it concerns the Montoyas and their particular affliction." The cottage interior was neat and sparsely furnished, herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, filling the air with unfamiliar scents. Mama Cecile gestured for him to sit at a small table while she prepared tea. "You're looking in the wrong place, doctor," she said, placing a steaming cup before him. "Though you won't find your answers in medical books." "Then where?" Thomas asked, too exhausted for skepticism. She studied him intently. "You've started to see things, haven't you? Dreams, visions, maybe writing you don't remember doing." Thomas stiffened. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because you've touched it now, the curse. Once you begin looking into the Montoya business, it looks back into you." She sipped her tea. "Tell me what you know so far." Thomas recounted everything. Sebastian's journal, the âme voleur, Marie Laveau, the spreading condition among the children. Mama Cecile listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer. The âme voleur is not just an object," she said when he finished. "In the wrong hands, it becomes a door, a prison too." "A prison for what?" "Souls." She said it simply, as if discussing the weather. Marie Laveau used it in certain rituals to hold souls temporarily during healing ceremonies. Sebastian Montoya didn't understand its purpose. When he stole it, he broke a seal that shouldn't have been broken. "You're saying it captures souls?" Mama Cecile nodded. "And now those souls want out. They're using the children as vessels, easier to inhabit the young, whose own souls aren't as firmly anchored. They take hold gradually, pushing the child's soul aside." Thomas thought of the flat voices, the unnatural movements. Are the children's souls gone? Not gone. Diminished? Suppressed? She leaned forward. "But if the possession completes, yes, they will be gone. Replaced. How many souls are we talking about?" Legend says Marie used the âme voleur to trap a dark spirit that was terrorizing the city, a spirit that itself had already consumed many souls. When Sebastian stole it, he didn't just take one captive soul, but dozens, maybe hundreds. Thomas felt ill. And they're all trying to come back, through the children, through anyone connected to the Montoya bloodline first, then outward. Her eyes narrowed. You've been in close contact with them. That's why you're starting to experience the effects. Thomas instinctively touched the corner of his eye. How do we stop it? The âme voleur must be found, and the proper rituals performed to reseal it. She hesitated. But after so many years, the binding magic will require significant power. What kind of power? Mama Cecile didn't answer directly. The Montoyas have been paying in installments, a little piece of each generation's soul, but it's not enough anymore. The barrier is too weak. She rose and went to an old chest, returning with a small cloth bag. Protection, she said, handing it to him. Wear it. It won't stop the influence completely, but it will slow it. Thomas took the gris-gris bag, detecting the scents of herbs and something metallic inside. The âme voleur will be hidden somewhere significant to the Montoyas, Mama Cecile continued. Somewhere, both public and private. A threshold place. Elena said it disappeared after Sebastian's death. Objects like that don't disappear. They conceal themselves until they're ready to be found again. She fixed him with an intense gaze. Be careful, Doctor. The souls within it are ancient and cunning. They've been waiting a long time for freedom. As Thomas left the cottage, the sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. He fingered the gris-gris bag in his pocket, already feeling foolish for accepting it. Yet the weight of it was somehow reassuring. When he reached his small house, something felt wrong. The door was unlocked, though he distinctly remembered securing it. Inside, lamps were lit that he hadn't left burning. "Hello?" he called, moving cautiously through the front room. No answer came, but as he entered his study, he stopped short. The Montoya children, Nicholas, Maria, and Antonio, sat in a perfect triangle on his floor. Their white eyes seemed to glow in the lamplight. "How did you get in here?" Thomas demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We followed the connection," Nicholas replied, his voice echoing slightly, as if speaking from inside a well. "You've begun to see, to hear. You need to go home. Your mother must be worried sick." Maria smiled, an expression that didn't touch her eyes. "Mother knows we're beyond her now. We go where we're called." "And who's calling you?" All three children pointed to Thomas's desk. On it lay Sebastian's journal, which should have been impossible, as he'd left it with Elena Montoya. "Do it wants to be found?" Antonio said, his small voice distorted like the others. "After all this time, it's ready." Thomas approached the desk cautiously. The journal lay open to a page he hadn't seen before, containing a detailed map of St. Louis Cemetery. No one, Marie Laveau's final resting place. Final. "He hid it where it belonged," Nicholas said, "where the Queen could watch over it, even in death." Thomas studied the map. A specific tomb was marked with the same symbol he'd seen in Sebastian's drawing of the âme voleur. "If I find it," Thomas asked, "will you help me seal it again? End this." "Possession." The children exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "We cannot fight what we are becoming," Maria said finally, "but a doorway opened can be closed, with the right key." "What key?" The children stood in unison, moving toward the door with that unnatural precision. "Or blood opens," Nicholas said over his shoulder. "Blood seals, blood of the thief," added Maria. "Blood of the vessels," finished Antonio. With that cryptic exchange, they filed out of his house, leaving Thomas alone with the journal and a growing sense of dread. "And you, have you ever felt like someone or something was trying to reach through you from somewhere else? Tell us in the comments. Dawn broke over New Orleans as Thomas made his way to St. Louis Cemetery, No. 1, the journal tucked inside his coat. He'd spent the night studying the map, comparing it to official cemetery layouts, and reading Sebastian's increasingly frantic later entries. The final pages detailed a ritual performed at Marie Laveau's tomb, not to destroy the âme voleur, but to hide it where the hungry ones couldn't use it. Sebastian had known he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd tried to correct it, but Thomas suspected he'd only postponed the inevitable. The cemetery gates were just being unlocked by the caretaker, who eyed Thomas suspiciously but allowed him entry when he claimed to be visiting a family tomb. The morning mist clung to the alleyways between the above-ground crypts, turning the white stone structures into ghostly sentinels. Thomas followed the map to Marie Laveau's tomb, already adorned with fresh offerings, flowers, coins, small trinkets left by those still seeking the Voodoo Queen's favor decades after her death. He glanced around to ensure he was alone before examining the tomb carefully. The symbol from Sebastian's journal was there, nearly invisible, a small marking etched into the bottom corner of the tomb, weathered by time and partially obscured by moss. Thomas brushed it clean with his handkerchief, and as his fingers traced the symbol, he felt a distinct warmth emanating from the stone. "It knows you're here," came a voice behind him. Thomas spun around. Nicholas stood there alone, his white eyes luminous even in the morning light. But something was different. The whiteness seemed to swirl now, like cream stirred into coffee, never settling. "How did you know I'd be here?" Thomas asked. "We always know where it is," Nicola replied, his voice carrying that same hollow quality. "We feel it pulling." "We?" Nicholas smiled, an expression too knowing for a child's face. "The waiting ones. The returning ones." Thomas studied the boy, noting how his movements seemed more fluid today, less mechanical, as if whatever was inhabiting him was learning to better control its vessel. "How many children have been affected now?" Thomas asked. 17, Nicholas answered promptly. "Soon to be more. The doorways opening wider each day." Thomas turned back to the tomb, running his hands along the edges where the front panel met the main structure. There must be a way to access whatever was hidden inside without desecrating the tomb itself. "He built a false panel," Nicholas said, approaching to stand beside Thomas. "Just behind and beneath. The Queen would appreciate his cleverness, if not his theft." The boy reached out with small fingers, pressing against a seemingly solid portion of the base. To Thomas's astonishment, a section of stone slid inward, revealing a small cavity beneath the tomb. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in faded red cloth. Thomas hesitated before reaching for it, remembering Mama Cecile's warnings. "If I take this," he asked Nicholas, "what happens to you, to the other children?" Nicholas tilted his head, considering, "Some of us are too far gone. The original has been diminished, consumed. Others might return if the doorway closes in time." "And you? Would the real Nicholas come back?" Something flickered across the boy's face, a momentary expression of confusion or pain, quickly suppressed. "Nicola was the first. He has been mostly replaced." Thomas felt a chill at the casual way the entity admitted to stealing a child's soul. "Then who am I speaking to?" "I was called Ezili in life," the voice from Nicholas said. "I was taken by the Dark One, then captured with it by the Queen, then stolen by the Spaniard. I've been waiting a very long time to feel the sun again." Thomas reached for the bundle, his medical rationality finally surrendering to the impossible reality before him. As his fingers touched the cloth, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass through him. Visions flashed behind his eyes, centuries of memories not his own, voices crying out in languages long dead, a darkness that hungered endlessly. He staggered backward, clutching the bundle to his chest. "Careful, Doctor," Nicholas, or Ezili, cautioned. "It senses freedom. The Dark One will try to claim you too." Thomas unwrapped the cloth with trembling hands, revealing a small figurine no larger than his palm. Carved from some dark wood and inlaid with bone, it depicted a hunched humanoid form with an elongated head and hollow eyes. Despite its small size, it felt unnaturally heavy, and the surface seemed to writhe beneath his fingers, though he could see it remained solid. "What do I do with it?" Thomas asked, his voice hoarse. "How do I close the doorway?" "Tears seal what was wrongfully taken," Nicholas said, voice resonating strangely. "The essence of grief can mend what was broken." "Tears?" Thomas felt confused. "I don't understand. The Montoyas have been paying with their essence, generation after generation, but to close it fully requires true sorrow, genuine remorse for what was stolen." From the mist emerged Elena Montoya, her face pale but determined. Behind her walked the other affected children, 16 of them in total, moving in perfect unison, white eyes fixed on the âme voleur in Thomas's hands. "I followed Nicola," Eleanor explained, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. "Mama Cecile found me last night. She explained what needs to be done." She approached Thomas, eyes fixed on the figurine. "My husband's family caused this. The grief we've carried for generations must end it." Thomas hesitated. "Elena, I don't know what will happen. This is beyond anything I understand. I lost my husband to this curse. It took something essential from him long before he died. I won't lose my son, too." She reached for the figurine. "Let me try, Doctor." Elena took the âme voleur in her hands and closed her eyes. Tears began to stream down her face, not from physical pain, but from generations of accumulated sorrow. As her tears fell onto the figurine, the air around them seemed to thicken and warp. "Remember them," Nicholas said softly to Elena. "Remember all those in your family who were changed. Feel the loss." The figurine began to vibrate in Elena's hands. The other children moved forward as one, forming a circle around them. They began to chant in that strange language Thomas had heard in his dreams, their voices blending into a single, multi-layered sound. The âme voleur grew brighter, a soft amber glow emanating from within. Cracks appeared in its surface, light spilling out, not the cold ancient light Thomas had glimpsed in his visions, but something warmer, almost mournful. "What's happening?" he gasped. Nicholas, or the entity within him, watched with those swirling white eyes. "The door is closing. They are fighting it." The chanting grew louder. The light from the cracks in the figurine intensified, shooting outward in thin beams that pierced the morning mist. Thomas felt something pulling at him, not physically, but deeper, as if something were trying to extract his very essence. "It's trying to take me," he realized aloud. Elena's tears fell faster as she clutched the figurine, her face a mask of grief for all her family had endured. "Focus on who you are, Doctor. Don't let it in." The pressure built until Thomas thought his head would explode. Then, with a sound like glass shattering, though the figurine remained intact, the light retracted violently. A shockwave of cold air burst outward, knocking Thomas and Elena to the ground. Silence fell over the cemetery. When Thomas managed to sit up, he saw the children standing motionless, their eyes closed. One by one, they began to collapse, not violently but gently, like puppets whose strings had been cut. Parents who had followed their entranced children to the cemetery rushed forward to catch them. The âme voleur in Elena's hands had changed. The wood now appeared ordinary, weathered and old, no longer writhing beneath her touch. The hollow eyes of the figurine, which had seemed bottomless before, were now simply empty sockets in a wooden face. Nicholas was the last child standing. His eyes opened slowly, no longer solid white, but returning to their natural brown, though a milky film still clouded them partially. "Nicholas," Elena whispered, reaching for her son. The boy looked at her with confusion, then recognition. "Mama!" His voice was his own again, a child's voice, uncertain and frightened. Elena gathered him into her arms, tears still streaming down her face. "Yes, mi hijo, I'm here." Thomas watched as the other children began to stir, some crying, some confused, all of them appearing more like themselves than they had in weeks. Not completely healed, Their eyes still showed traces of that unnatural whiteness, and they moved with a slight hesitation, as if relearning how to control their own bodies. "And did it work?" Thomas asked Nicholas quietly. The boy looked at him, and for a moment, Thomas saw something ancient behind those partially cleared eyes. "The door is closed," Nicholas said, his voice briefly carrying that hollow echo before returning to normal. But not everyone came back, and not everyone left. 1 month later, the Montoya incident, as it came to be known in certain circles of New Orleans, had faded from public attention. Medical authorities attributed the children's condition to mass hysteria or possibly contaminated water affecting the optic nerve. The whiteness in their eyes gradually receded, though never completely in some cases. Thomas kept the arme voleur locked in a lead box in his office, unwilling to destroy it for fear of releasing whatever might still be trapped inside. Sometimes, late at night, he thought he could hear faint whispers coming from the box, promises, threats, pleas for freedom. The affected children returned to their lives, though parents reported subtle changes in personality, interests abandoned, new talents manifested, strange knowledge of things they couldn't possibly have learned. Small pieces of others left behind. Perhaps Nicholas Montoya was the most changed. Though outwardly a normal boy again, he sometimes spoke in riddles that hinted at memories spanning centuries. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his eyes would briefly cloud over with white, and he would smile a smile that belonged to someone or something much older than his years. The Montoya curse wasn't broken, Thomas concluded in his private journal, just contained, the debt postponed once more, but not forgiven. He wondered if, generations later, children with Montoya blood would once again begin to change, their souls gradually displaced by those still waiting on the other side of a door that was closed, but not locked forever. If you want to hear more whispers from the darkness, follow the channel. The next story may be closer than you imagine.